Egunon, izan berriro ongi etorri, eskerrik asko. Minutu gutxi batzuk gora bera, baina esan dezakeguneko puntua hasi garela. Atzo esan izuen, atxaldeko ordua dela arriskutsua, goizekoa, ez da, xamurragoa. Badakigu, gaur gainera goizago, lehenago hasi garela, egunak hizketarako, gogoetarako, hausnarketarako, aukera asko dakartzalako eta danak baliatu nahi ditugu, eskerrak eman nahi dizkizuet berriro, gurekin izateko beta hartu duzuelako. Gaurkoak ere Hizkuntzen-Aniztasunaren gaira eramango gaitu, gaurkoak beste hizkin batzuetatik begiratzeko aukera emango digu, Foroko gaietako beste baten ardatza esan dezagun, Europako Hizkuntza-Aniztasuna babesteko politikak eta tresnak dira. Eta horren inguruan jardungo dugu nagusiki goizeko saioan. Lan bloke modura planteatu dugu foroan, badakizue, kongresua baino gehiago foroa izatea nahi dugula, zuek ere parte hartzea nahi dugula, eta horretarako, gogoratuko dizkitzuet berriro ere parte hartzeko, ze bide ditugun, batetik txartelak erabiliz zuen galderak geuri helarazi, lankideak emango dizkitzue txartelak, eskertuko nizueke, alik eta bizkorren edo modu agil xamar batean ematen badizkigutzue galdera horiek, hori batetik eta gero bestetik Twitterren bitartez ari baldin bazarete, UNESCO etxearen kontutik eta aldala traola aipatuz, Donostia Forun traola aipatuz, galdera horiek guri helaraztea ere eskertuko genizueke bide batez, esango dizuet, wifia erabili nahi izan eskero erabiltzailea foroa dela, eta pasaitza 2016 zenbakiz idatzita. Foroa erabiltzailea eta 2006 pasaitza. Kartaren egoera aztertuko dugu, oraingo honetan, hain zuzen ere, ez da dudarik, Eremu Urriko Hizkuntzen Europako kartak izan duela eta izango duela zerregina eta zerresana hizkuntzen biziberritzean eta normalizazio bidean Europan. Karta hori zertan den azalduko dugu eta karta hori biziberritzeko eta karta hori hobetzeko proposamenak ere izango dira gaur egunean zehar. Baina lehen da biziko hurbilpena, berriro ere makrotik hasita eta gero ondoren xehetasunetara iritsi ahal izateko, kartaren egoera aurkeztea izango da, gaur egungo Europarentzat eta epe motz edo ertaineko etorkizuneko Europarentzat duen garrantzia azpimarratzeko, aurrera egiteko ideiak ere emateko. Hoi bezala, aurkezpen sistemaia ezagutzen duzue atzodanik, lankide batek edo pertsona batek egingo du horren kontestualizazioa eta ondoren aditu ekarpenak ere izango ditugu. Eta hain zuzen ere, kontestualizazio hori egiteko gurekin dugu Mikel Arregi, Euskara Bilatik, Euskararen Nafar Institutotik. Mikel, zuretzat.
Egunon eta ongi etorriak gaurko lehenengo saiora. Gurekin bezna Zernitz Grotitz dugu, bera Kroaziako Rijekako Unibertsitateko irakaslea eta zuzenbide fakultatearen nazioarteko zuzenbideko departamentuko burua da. Giza eskubideen nazioarteko zuzenbideari buruzko eskolak ematen ditu eta gai honi buruz hainbat artikulu argitaratu ditu eta proiektu zientifiko ugari egin ditu. Gaur hemen dago dituen arduren artean hauxe ere duelako. 1988an Euroitunaren adituen batzordeko kide izendatu zuten eta 2013 urtetik aurrera presidentea da, batzorde horren presidentea da. Gaur aurkeztuko digun gaia ardura horrekin estuki lotua dago. Gaia hauxe da, Eskualdeetako edo Eremu Urriko Hizkuntzen Europako Karta eta Europako Hizkuntza Politika. Euroituna nazioarteko hitzarmena da, Europako Kontseiluaren ministro batzordeak 1992an konbentzio gisa onetsi zuen eta 11 estatu kidek Espainia barne urte bereko azaroan sinatu zuten. Espainiak 2001an berretsi zuen Euroituna. Bezna Zernitz Grotitz irakasleak bere aurkezpenean Eurogutunaren balioari buruz, bere indarguneaz, bere auleziaz hitz egingo digu. Beraz, nahi duzunean, has zaitezke zure aurkezpena egiten.
Good morning. I'm sorry, I've got too many things on me. So let me start with a few words of Basque that the Google translator helped me find. Egun on. Thank you. And of course, I would like first to thank the organizers for inviting me here to speak this morning. I hope you have all settled down and you are comfortable. And I'm also glad to see some of the familiar faces that I've been meeting in my work on the Charter, and especially as a rapporteur for Spain in several rounds. I am here, of course, as the chair of the Committee of Experts for the European Charter for Regional and Minority Languages, and I'm well aware of the interest that people in Spain have. People in Spain have for this instrument, and of course also the role that this treaty has in the protection and promotion of regional minority languages, including the Basque language in this region. As you know, the Charter is a legal instrument, so it's a treaty whose main purpose is to provide protection and promotion to regional and minority languages. And it was, interestingly enough, it was not conceived as a human rights treaty, but its purpose was to protect the cultural heritage of Europe. So all the languages spoken in Europe were considered to be the cultural heritage of Europe. However, it was inevitable that human rights of the speakers were affected in a positive way, because the Charter promotes the use of regional or minority languages in many fields of public life. First of all, the education, in judiciary, public administration, media, and cultural activities, social and economic field, and transnational cooperation. I know that many of you are familiar with the Charter's main features, but however, let me just remind you briefly of its main characteristics. And I hope that later on in the discussion I will get help from the Spanish member of our committee, Mr. Fernando Ramayo, who is listening me with attention. As you may know, the Charter is divided into two main parts, and they are called Part 2 and Part 3. So obviously Part 1 is something that is not of interest for the substance of the Charter. Part 2 is listing the objectives and principles that states parties should pursue with respect to all regional or minority languages spoken on their territory, and which comply with the definition given in its Article 1. And that is the languages traditionally used within a given territory of a state by its nationals and different from the official language or languages of that state. So whatever language can be covered by this definition, then it should also be considered to be covered by at least Part 2 of the Charter. With respect to definition, the Charter specifically excludes languages of the migrants or dialects of the official language of the state. In practice, however, there are sometimes problems concerning a particular language. Is it a dialect? Is it an immigrant language, or is it a minority language with a separate identity? It is up to the states parties to determine which languages comply with the definition. However, full regard has to be taken also of the wishes of the speakers of that particular language. In some states parties, such as Spain, confusion about the status of regional or minority languages occurred because the authorities understood that this definition includes only languages with co-official status on a defined part of the territory. However, the Committee of Experts interprets Article 1 to cover all languages that comply with the definition contained in Article 1, and maintains that parties are obliged to take them into account in designing policies, legislation, and practice as provided for under Part 2. Its Part 3, on the other hand, is based on the so-called menu system. So a menu, like when you go to a restaurant and you are offered a menu and you can pick and choose what do you want to have from this menu. So the Charter has a menu system providing that when ratifying, states are free to choose a certain number of obligations, and the minimum is set at 35 obligations, among those offered by Articles 8 to Article 14, for some or all of the regional or minority languages spoken on their territory. So these articles cover these various fields of public life, and they also provide various levels of stringency of undertakings in order to allow states parties to choose the appropriate level to a concrete situation of each language. Perhaps just for an illustration, in education, states can choose between offering a language as a subject, so teaching of the language, or they can choose to have a substantial part of the education in that language, or they can choose to have the entire education with the teaching of the official language. So the entire education in the minority language, but with the teaching of the official language. So this is what is offered, and states are free to choose one of those offered undertakings. However, not all states used this opportunity, but chose the same level of commitments for all languages, regardless of their size or of their status. The upside of this approach is to demonstrate that all regional or minority languages deserve some level of promotion and protection. The downside, however, is that the level of implementation of the Charter for some of them remains very low and with very little prospect of improving in the near future. So the main difference between Part 2 and Part 3 of the Charter is the level of specific commitments that states parties undertake. Part 2 provides for basic principles and the objectives that have to be pursued, for example, to encourage the use of minority languages in private and in public. That's one general objective given under Part 2. But if you compare that to some of the articles under Part 3, the states parties, for example, may choose specific obligations in broadcasting media, public or private, radio and or TV, etc., etc. So there is a difference in the nature of the obligation. The Charter, of course, provides for monitoring based on states parties' reports every 3 years and other available information that we gather, for example, on what we call the on-the-spot visits. So where we meet the speakers, where we meet the representatives of the speakers and talk to them and gather information directly from them. And then we make our own report, and we present our report to the Committee of Ministers, which is the body of the Council of Europe, as I usually say, with the muscles. They are the body consisting of foreign ministers of member states of the Council of Europe, and they have the power to issue recommendations that the states have to follow. The Committee of Ministers, of course, is free to change our proposal of recommendations because it's the list of recommendations, it belongs to them, so to speak. It's in their remit. Just to remind ourselves briefly of the case of Spain. In its ratification instrument, Spain used a somewhat cryptic language, declaring the languages protected by Part 3 in the following way. So now I quote, "Spain declares that, for the purposes of the mentioned articles, are considered as regional or minority languages. The languages recognized as official languages in the statutes of autonomy of the autonomous communities of the Basque Country, Catalonia, Balearic Islands, Galicia, Valencia, and Navarra. For the same purposes, Spain also declares that the language is protected by the statutes of autonomy in the territories where they are traditionally spoken are also considered as regional or minority languages. So no mention of the languages as such, no names, no definition of the specific territory where these languages are spoken. And this was very important for us as the Committee of Experts because Part 3 needs these definitions. We have to define what languages and in which territories are protected. So we interpreted the declaration as covering, of course, Basque in the Basque Country and in Navarra, Catalan in Catalonia and the Balearic Islands, Galician in Galicia, and Valencian in Valencia. And due to the changes made in the Statute of Catalonia, the Statute of Autonomy, the Committee of Experts now considers also Aranese in Catalonia to be covered as Part 3 language. However, based on the same declaration, the Committee of Experts considered also the following languages to be covered by Part 2 of the Charter: Galician in Castilla and León, Aragonese and Catalan in Aragon, Asturian and Galician Asturian in Asturias, and Leonese in Castilla and León. So these languages, in the way that we interpreted the declaration, have to be considered as covered by at least Part 2 of the Charter. However, that was not the end of the list. The committee identified several other languages as possibly being covered by Part 2 of the Charter as well. So Arabic in the autonomous city of Ceuta, Galician in Extremadura, Portuguese in Extremadura and in Castilla and León, Tamazight in the autonomous city of Melilla, and Valencian in Murcia. For some of these languages, the Committee of Experts is still waiting for the clarification of their status, whether they actually comply with the definition traditionally used languages in the territory of the state. And furthermore, Kalo, the language spoken by Roma, is also considered to be protected as what the Charter recognizes as the non-territorial language, so the language traditionally spoken, without, however, in an identified territory, but in the territory of the state in a wider sense. So, in other words, there is no village in Spain where Kalo is spoken, but traditionally the language has been present on the territory of the state, and for now we consider that to be the case in the territory of Catalonia. I must say that the Spanish authorities were somewhat surprised by this approach of the Committee of Ministers, but this was perfectly in line with the Charter, as most of these languages seem to be covered by the definition given in Article 1 of the Charter. But Spain is not the only state party that had not been fully aware of this consequence of the ratification of the Charter, not taking into account smaller languages with no co-official status. This is one of the very important effects that the ratification has. The states, but also speakers, become aware of the existence or the separate identity of some languages and the potential the Charter offers for their protection. So let me give you some examples of other states. In my own state, in Croatia, the list of protected languages had to be extended to cover a very small community of so-called Istro-Romanian. So that is the language spoken by the small community of shepherds who came to Croatia in the 16th century, and they lost a separate national identity, so they are considered to be Croats, but they kept this language which has some connection with the Romanian spoken today. So this is Istro-Romanian, and we asked the authorities to recognize it as a separate language that has to be protected, at least by Part 2 of the Charter. When Slovenia ratified the Charter, they forgot about German, because German was traditionally spoken in a very small part of Slovenia. After World War II, most of them were expelled, but then still there is this community of the German speakers, and that language deserves to be protected by the Charter. Slovenia also had a problem with languages, the Croatian language and the Serbian language, because there is a dispute, an ongoing dispute between the Committee of Experts and the Slovenian authorities. Are these two languages immigrant languages from the period of former Yugoslavia? Or are these languages actually traditional languages spoken on some territories in Slovenia? And actually the Committee of Experts had run a research, and we established that there were some communities, especially along the border, where these two languages had been traditionally used many years or even centuries ago. In Norway, the speakers of Kven demanded to be distinguished from the speakers of Standard Finnish, claiming that they speak a different language. The Committee of Experts encouraged the Norwegian authorities to enter into the dialogue with the speakers, and Norway finally recognized Kven as a separate minority language. Furthermore, Norway and other Scandinavian countries ratified for the Sami language, singular, when in fact several Sami languages are spoken there. Some of them not even mutually intelligible, but they are covered by the Sami language in the ratification instrument. And these countries considered that one expression, Sami language, is covering all the variants, or was it varieties? And I'm looking at my linguist friends of the same language. And it's an interesting dynamics that actually in almost every monitoring ground, there's a new Sami language popping up. Because as the speakers become aware of the possibility to be protected under the Charter, they claim their separate identity. In Sweden, as a result of the monitoring and the recommendations made by both the Committee of Experts and the Committee of Ministers, the authorities extended the so-called homeland area, so the administrative area where the special protective measures are in place for the Sami language, and they expanded it so that now even a language called Lulle Sami is covered by the national legislation. Although even without that change in the national legislation, the Committee of Experts considered that this Sami language was also covered by the Charter. In all cases, the committee has always tried to follow the principle that the ratification should make sense. If the state chose a certain undertaking, it must strive to implement it, so regardless of the national legislation. The recognition of original or minority language is one of the first steps required by state party of the Charter. This is usually necessary at the national level for enabling legal and practical measures in education, culture, in public life, etc. For some states, The ratification instrument was the first such step, because this was the first time that these languages have been officially recognized. For example, a number of languages in the Netherlands, for the number of languages, that was the first official act of recognition. Although the formal recognition is not something that is really necessary for the application of the Charter, the Committee of Experts will look into the actual existence of the language, whether the language is there and whether the language is spoken, and then whether the language deserves the protection. In Ukraine, for example, there had been a long dispute about the Ruthenian, or the Rusin language as they call it. The authorities consider that to be a dialect of Ukrainian, but the speakers consider that to be a separate language. And what is more interesting, in some other states, that language is recognized as a separate language. For example, in Croatia, in Serbia, in Hungary, this language is recognized as a separate language. However, due to the pressure by the Committee of Experts, the authorities decided to apply protective measures without the formal recognition of its speakers as a separate minority group. So they recognize the language, but they don't recognize separate identity of the speakers, which I must say makes them very, very frustrated. We have just been to Ukraine a couple of weeks ago, and we met with the representatives of the Ruthenian speakers, and they were very upset and very frustrated by the fact that they are not recognized as a separate minority. In Spain, the Committee of Experts expressed in the last monitoring round its concern about the way the minority languages spoken in Aragon are described in the law on the use and protection and promotion of languages and linguistic modalities. It makes no explicit reference to the names of the traditional minority languages, which are Aragonese and Catalan, and the Committee of Experts will probably pursue this further in the next monitoring round. So looking back at Spain, the languages with the co-official status enjoy a wide protection both under the Charter and the national legislation at the level of the autonomous communities. The Part 3 languages, by and large, enjoy political support in their autonomous communities in the fields under their competence. In most cases, education will be satisfactory. In case of Basque, we've noticed the popularity of the Model D that is now spreading also in the mixed zone of Navarre, and I understand also in the zona non vascófona, so that's a good sign for the protection and promotion of the language. We find a very positive sign of the cooperation between the Basque country and Navarre on the issue of the Basque language. Over the years, we have followed the changes in the political support in Navarre, reflected in exchanges or not, so depending on the political power there, exchanges of textbooks for schools, or the broadcasting of the TV program across the border, which is in international law not really a border, but obviously in the Spanish context it's a real border. I'm glad to learn that the relationship is still positive and that the two sides are working for the interest of the language. More cooperation is still needed between Catalonia and Valencia. That should probably overcome their dispute over the common language and work together in the relevant fields in accordance with the Charter. The fourth evaluation report on the application of the Charter in Spain that was published earlier this year, however, showed that certain difficulties have persisted in Spain. The interest of the central authorities has remained almost invisible, as if they have no responsibility for the implementation of the Charter. The rule of international law, however, is that the state as such is responsible for the implementation of all treaties, regardless of the division among federal or administrative units. The lack of engagement of the central authorities is seen, for example, in the impediment in judiciary by the famous Article 231 of the Organic Act on Judicial Power. It provides for the possibility of using the official language of the corresponding autonomous community in court proceedings if none of the parties objects. Instead, the provision should be the other way around. It should be in favor of the use of the minority language in accordance with Article 9 of the Charter that the Spanish authorities have chosen when ratifying the Charter. That, of course, would require training of the staff, including the judges, in the language of the forum, or at least the use of competent interpreters. However, we know that the system of rotation of judges in Spain is not favorable to this undertaking, with the possible exception of Catalan, where we understand that there is a number of lawyers who take exam in Catalan. So the similar situation, apart from judiciary, exists also in the field of state administration and public services, such as railroad or postal services, and in particular in healthcare. The lack of support or initiative by the central authorities affects negatively most of the efforts taken by the autonomous communities in these fields, because they can only go this high, and then the upper echelon of competence, so to speak, belongs to the central authorities, and they should take up their responsibility. Spain is not unique. This similar problem exists in Germany, another federal state, or a federal state, remains, the central authorities there dispatched the responsibilities to the federal units, the Länder, refusing their duty to provide the necessary legislation for the effective implementation of the Charter, and that remains a problem. This illustration leads us to the next problem that some states parties are facing after 4 or 5 or even 6 monitoring rounds. There seems to be a ceiling reached in the implementation and application of the Charter. In some cases, the Committee of Experts has to repeat the recommendations from previous monitoring rounds, or to at least continue to press on the problem to be solved. So there is little or no real improvement in the implementation of the Charter. There may be several reasons for this stalemate in the implementation. In some cases, the ratification instrument may have been too ambitious, especially in cases of the states that ratified in a manner of one size fits all languages. For example, in Ukraine, the same level of protection is envisaged for Russian, that has thousands and thousands of speakers, and Yiddish, that has hardly any speakers. So you cannot have the same instrument of ratification in these very different cases. When some German Länder put Romani under Part 3 protection, it was more a political gesture of recognition than a real attempt to treat Romani as the Part 3 language. Romani is still, in most cases, a vernacular form of communication. Its speakers are often reluctant to use it in public or to have it in education. So if a state promises to have private TV and radio channels in some very small minority languages, should the Committee of Experts insist on the result? Or should it take a reasonable approach and be realistic about the prospects of having such channels? So we have tried to be more realistic, but we are not in a position to ignore the ratification instrument, because this is an official statement by the state. We are going to do this, this, and that. So we, as the committee of experts, have to ask them, so when and how are you going to implement the ratification instrument? In some countries, the political support of for regional minority languages change with the changes of the ruling parties at national or local level. In the present-day Europe, the rise of intolerance in societies affects minority languages and their speakers as well. In the Czech Republic, groups of young skinheads attack any display of minority languages. In Poland or in Finland, Russian speakers are often stigmatized, even more so in Ukraine after the events connected to Crimea and the war that they are now facing. In my own country, the display of Cyrillic script on government buildings in most places, in places most affected by the recent war, brought traumatic memories, and some people reacted against it, even though the same script, the Cyrillic script, is also part of the Croatian cultural heritage. Recently, I attended a conference on the Framework Convention on the Protection of National Minorities, and one of the more pessimistic conclusions was that this kind of a treaty would not have been possible today. It is indeed a rather gloomy perspective. At the same conference, a lot of discussions referred to separate education in minority languages in a very negative fashion, calling it segregated education, especially in the post-conflict societies such as Croatia or Bosnia and Herzegovina. Is it really so that the right to have education in one's own language should have a negative connotation? In Croatia, there have been separate Italian or Czech language schools for decades, never causing any feelings of segregation of the Italian or the Czech children. Even more, many children from the majority attend such schools. So what are the reasons for such a negative perspective on education in minority languages? The Charter clearly provides for this kind of education. It encourages states to use minority language as much as possible in education, without, however, any prejudice against the learning of the official language of the state. So separate education should not result in creation of ghettos. Their purpose should be the integration of children in the society as a whole, at the same time preserving their identity and their language. Including children from the majority in various forms can help the realization of this goal. The organizers of today's conference sent me a list of some tough questions about the future of the Charter. I must admit that the fact that we have not had a new ratification or signature for some years now is worrying. The Charter has 25 states parties out of 47 member states of the Council of Europe. The Framework Convention stopped at 39. Many of the states parties are also member states of the EU, but still many are not. 10 of them are not states parties to the Charter. It shows that we need more political support in Europe to include more states that will be willing to commit themselves to the obligations under the Charter. I think we can claim that the Charter has been vital for the protection of the languages at risk of extinction, such as, for example, Yiddish in the Netherlands. It has also given a public visibility to many languages, for example, Romani in many countries. And I also believe that that the Charter gave more power to the languages such as Basque or Catalan that now have an international instrument to rely on. I remember that at the beginning, the Basque language was too often connected to terrorism, and that is today not the case. That has changed, I think, also based on some of the reports that the Committee of Experts made. The Charter, in a way, legitimized the requests for the promotion and protection of these and other languages. Similar situation happened in some other countries with various results. In Northern Ireland, Irish is still exposed to stigma, and it is used in political games between the political parties there, but the Charter also provides it with the legal tool to fight for its protection. And on the plus side, so to speak, let us not forget that the Charter gave rise to scientific research and writings about regional and minority languages that also contributed to their promotion. Frankly speaking, in some aspects, the Charter is probably outdated. Technology brought about new media, for example, old-fashioned TV and radio, and especially printed media play a smaller role today than 20 years ago. Young people have a different approach to media today, and they develop new platforms. Social media have become the most important channel of communication. Well, even just now we heard the invitation to Twitter. So we don't talk anymore, we Twitter. So that's a new aspect of communication. The notion of trans-border broadcasting is also not quite the same. The Charter needs adjustment in interpretation to be able to follow this development. New technology also affects education, so the distance learning may play an important role for many languages. Availability of texts and forms in administration on the internet now also makes it so much easier for the authorities to provide these documents in all languages. It was not, of course, envisaged by the drafters of the Charter. And finally, let me just remind you or let you know that in 2017, the Charter will mark the 25th anniversary of its signing, and in 2018, the 20th anniversary of its entry into force. And I invite you to join us in these festive occasions and celebrate with us the successes of the Charter. But I also invite you to be critical where necessary in order to improve its implementation. And another addition from my Google translator, Eskerik Asko. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Entzuten da, bai. Eskerrik asko egin duzun aurkezpenagatik. Oso interesgarria izan da, eta nik, galderen txanda irekitzeko lehenengo galdera planteatuko dizut. Abiatuta gainera, nik hobekien ezagutzen dudan errealitatetik, Nafarroako errealitatetik. Aitortu behar dut, Nafarroan, adituen batzordearen txostenak eta ministroen gomendioak beti arretaz eta interes handiz jaso ditugula. Nafarroan Euskaldunon eskubideen aitortza oso ezberdina delako hango legeek ezartzen duten zonifikazioaren ondorioz. Azken txostenean eta gomendioetan ze betetzen den jasota dago, eta hori onartu behar da, eta aurrera pausoak ematen direla ere onartu behar da, baina bestaldetik gabeziak edo non dauden aipatu egiten da, ez? Gaur aipatu duzu, justizian, zerbitzu publikoetan, osasun zerbitzuetan, hezkuntza arloan, oraindik arazoak ere badaudela, ez? Nafarroan azken urtean, edo azken urte terdian, izan dugun esperientzia da, hor agertzen diren gomendioak betetzeko alegina egin ezkero gauzak hobetu daitezkela. Baina horrek ere erakusten du, naiz eta gomendio horiek egon, betetzeko alegina ez bada egiten, ez dala ezer gertatzen, neurrinde batean, ez? Hau da, estatuek eta tokiko administrazioek konpromiso batzuk hartu dituzte, bere buruari konpromiso batzuk ezarri dizkiote, baina gero ez badira betetzen, gauzak hor geratzen dira. Azpimarratu duzu batzutan sabaia jote den sensazioa, ez? Orduan nire galdera da, zer egin beharko litzateken, zerbait egin badaiteke, betetzen ez direnen kasuan, ohartzeko konpromiso horiek guk gure administrazioek hartu dituztela. Ea tresnak ote dauden edo ze tresnak jarri beharko lirateken betetzeko gomendioak eta txostenean agertzen diren oharrak.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. You actually touched upon a problem which is wider perhaps than this conference, because this is a problem that belongs to the international law field. If you have a legal commitment, then the state is expected to deliver on the commitment and on the promises it made. There is no real sanction in terms of fine or something like that in most of the cases under international law, but there is this feeling of obligation that states have to respect. So when Spain ratified the Charter with a certain promises, internationally it is expected to deliver. What is needed, what our committee can do, we can pursue and we can continue with the pressure, with the recommendations that we make. But what is necessary is to come from the inside of the Spanish society and to have the political consensus on the improvement of the situation of minority languages. As I said, there seemed to be a ceiling reached, and so you need an extra effort to overcome the ceiling, especially in these difficult fields, such as judiciary and the health service, for example. To have judges using the language in the proceedings, it takes much more. It takes also not just the training in the language, but also the legal training. I mean, I may be able to speak English, but I wouldn't be able to run the proceedings in English, in an English court. I need education in English law and in English legal terminology, and all the background has to be widened, which is where the universities should step in, and they should offer programs for lawyers also in the minority languages, so that you have actually judges who will be able to run the proceedings in these languages. So an additional effort is needed, especially on the side of the central authorities, to make the legal framework favorable for the use of minority languages, but also other players in the society have to step in and to enable the use of minority languages in all the fields covered by the Charter's ratification instrument. Thank you.
daude honen inguruan, saiatuko naiz ahalik eta gehienak, denboraz larri gabiltza baino ahalik eta gehienak orain ematen, gero ere, hain justu ere gai honen inguruan jarraituko dugu eztabaidan beraz, lekua izango dute. Egin duzun galderaren bidetik, Mikel, jende asko hartu du parte, horixe bera azpimarratuz, ezta? Karta ez betetzea egotzi izan zaio Espainiar Estatuari, baita Nafar administrazioari ere bai, ez dute karta betetzeko neurririk hartu, bestetik Frantziak ez du euro gutuna berretsi, derrigorrezkotasunik betearazteko neurririk eta eskubide urraketen ondoriozko isunik gabe zertan lagun dezaken euro gutunak. Hoxe galdetzen dute, baita ere kasua eramaten dute Galizia aldera eta horixe bera azpimarratzen da, ez da? Eta bukaeran esaldia esaten du, son ilegales respecto de ellos mismos, alegia onartu egin da, eta kasu horretan zer egin. Eta honen gainean, eta ja banoa galderara, parte hartzen ari den beste lagun batek dio, eskerrik asko nere perspektiba aldatzeagatik, orain ulertzen dut, hizkuntza bat espada erabiltzen desagertu daiteke, beste baten erabilera masiboaren aurrean, eta Espainiako kasuan gaztelaniaren aurrean. Zer egin dezake herritarrak? Eurogutunari ekarpenak egin altzaizkio, egin aldizkio herritar soil batek, eta hala baldin bada nola, eta hala ez bada zergaitik.
Yes, thank you very much. As for the sanctions, as I said, the international law is somewhat limited in that respect. The example of France is something that my students always show to, because France is like this bad pupil in the classroom, and they don't want to they just they signed the charter some years ago, but then the Conseil d'État said that this signature was illegal, so they did make some changes in the law and the constitution, even to enable France to ratify, but at the same time, then they just forgot about it. Some other states, for example, Italy, they signed more than 10 years ago, and whenever we ask about ratification instrument, they say it's in the parliament, it's in the process. So that has been going on for a number of years now, with no change. So there are other states which should perhaps be a good example, lead, but they are not. And I must say, in this respect, Spain is actually a good example, because they did ratify for the number of languages, and there is some kind of legal framework that enables the use of the languages, and this should be pursued. And I think Spain, regardless of the critics that are justified, also needs to be praised for the effort that they made. The sanctions also may be possible. That depends on your own legal framework, the national legal framework, whether you can take a state body to the court, to the national court. I don't know what is the position of the Charter of International Treaties in the Spanish legal system as such. Is there a possibility to go to the Constitutional Court and ask for the fulfillment of the international obligation or not? So there could be venues also for that. As for the general public, of course, they can do most. They can demand, they can use the language, they can demand the services, they can demand the education. So the bigger the numbers, obviously, the bigger the pressure. So also the state will react favorably to that. In many parts of the Charter, you will find a reference to the needs and wishes of the speakers. So the Charter realizes that it is up to the speakers to promote their language, and at one point we had a campaign saying, use it, don't lose it. And I think that here in Spain, but also in other countries, for example, the promotion of Welsh in the UK, that they have some very good examples that I know also people in Spain rely on when the the spread of the use of the language is concerned. Be proud of your language. That's what the Charter has to say.
Azken galdera bat egingo dugu, gainerakoak esan bezala saiatuko gara, etorriko diren gainerakoekin batera ere banatzen, baina bai aprobetxatu nahi nuke aditu modura egiten zaion galdera hau. Zein estatu izango litzateke esparru zentraletik eremu urriko hizkuntzen kudeaketa egokiena egiten duena, eta zergaitik?
That's a good question. We have not yet organized the contest for the best country, but we may want to do that in this anniversary's context. From the top of my head, I would say Switzerland, perhaps, because of the long tradition of the respect of these languages, and they are considered the national languages. So they ratified for Romansh and Italian as the lesser used official languages. And in several, 2 or 3 rounds already, they have fulfilled the undertakings for Italian. It was really very quick. But then that is a very special situation. I would say Scandinavian countries, of course, money helps. Let's be frank. So in Norway, the position of the Sami language is very strong, especially in their homeland. And so that is also a good example to look up at. The majority of other state parties have these problems that are slowly being removed or being solved. However, we do notice recently a tendency of a setback. So these new movements in Europe affect also the minority languages and their speakers.
Hementxe utziko dugu iruditzen baldin bazaizuen, jarraituko dugu, gai honen inguruan eta zuen galderak eta sor daitezken berriak ere bai saiatuko gara, ondoko mailari ere helarazten, baino orain arte egindako lana eskertzeko txaloa mesedez.